Okay.
Hey, good morning. Welcome to the Morning Haze. I am Josh Hayes. This morning, I am joined with Rhett Bruno, the author of Titanborn, and also the co-owner of Athon Books and author of the short story interview for the End of the World, which is now been nominated for a Nebula. Um, and so we're going to talk about that today on the Morning Haze. Welcome, Rhett, to the show.
Hey, Josh, thanks for having me.
Absolutely, dude. We've talked on live before, and obviously we've talked a lot because of Athon and what's going on with that and my book there. So I wanted to get you on and talk about your short story. I had Amy on last Friday talking about her short story and kind of the shenanigans that went along with the nomination and all that, and then kind of the news and everything that happened with the 20 Books group and Twitter and all that madness. But before we get on all that, I'd like to just kind of get a baseline for who Rhett Bruno is and introduce you to the viewers, and then we'll talk about your short story.
Yeah, so I'm a science fiction and fantasy author of science fiction. I've written the Circuit Saga, and Titanborn just came out again, and it's the Children of Titan series. And then on the fantasy side, I write the Buried Goddess Saga with Jamie Castle. I'm also an editor and co-owner of Athon Books, which is just starting to kick off really well. We're actually publishing one of Josh's books, which I just read. It's excellent. And that's it for right now. And then, yeah, my story was just nominated for a Nebula Award. Everyone knows all the stuff going on, but yeah, it was a really exciting moment for me in my career, especially where I came from, where I was mostly traditional, and now I'm mostly hybrid and kind of trying to control my path a little bit more myself.
Well, it's kind of interesting because I mean, that's pretty much the conversation right now, right? Like indie versus trad pub, which is kind of silly to have that dialogue and the conversation in those aspects. But I know several really successful traditional authors that are going into kind of a hybrid or just going straight indie in their writing careers. And you were published traditionally with your books, and then bought the rights back from your publisher, and then published them through Athon and through by yourself, basically. So let's talk a little bit about that, since the conversation for some reason around this whole thing is the difference between indie and traditional. What are your thoughts on the two, and what precipitated your exit from a standalone traditional career?
I mean, I honestly, I think there's merits to both, and they both come with their own unique challenges. And again, like, I tend to want to be more hands-on, and
Mm,
by signing up with a publisher, you don't really have control of the covers and stuff like that. And I tend to think covers are really important. Like I love my new Titanborn cover. I didn't love my old one. And situations like that, I think what happens with traditional publishing, and again, I have a more experienced agent now, is it doesn't matter who you sign with. It really matters what the deal says. And if you're
right.
a no name author like me and my old agent, we get wanted to jump on Random House, and it was great. It gave me a lot of connections, and I learned a ton from their editing staff. But it was a smaller one of their imprints, and it didn't have a huge marketing base in digital to really push the book as well as I thought it could do.
Mm.
I think they'd admit as much themselves. And so, I mean, you're kind of stuck left with hoping they do the right thing. And a lot of what you see on the traditional side is the books that are going to be bestsellers are pretty much chosen to be bestsellers before they come out. You
Right.
know what books they are. They're the ones that are getting the buzz everywhere.
Right.
And a lot of the authors I met when I was with Random House went to a Comic Con. Some of them are in the exact same situation was where the book did okay and critically it did really well, but it never took off. And then others you see everywhere, and they have the huge marketing budget, and that could really come down to like what's an issue in the real world, timing, what's popular, and it's a combination of all those things. And they're businesses that I don't think have like a great line of credit. Like they need to return their investment on these little books and make most of their money off of the bigger, more well-known authors.
Right.
So that's where you run into this chance. Like if you're doing it to start off, and again, I wouldn't change what I did, because if I hadn't, I probably wouldn't have been able to be where I am today. I made connections. It allowed me to recruit for like the platform like Sci-Fi Bridge more easily, because people saw, oh, like he was with Random House. At least I know he's not
Right.
some random person emailing a bunch of shit. So,
Right.
that's where it helped, I think. And obviously, I place a huge value on editing, and I learned a lot about just self-editing by working with my editor there, who was great on Titanborn and the sequel. And it's really, honestly, you're taking a shot in the dark. And it can be the same if you're self-publishing and you don't really know what you're doing, because it's a
Right. Absolutely.
I mean, that's a lot. Some of the things we're doing with Athon are taking books that we found that we think are great, but they never really sold, because unless you know how to market in the indie market right then and there, because it can change really quickly, you probably aren't going to sell anything unless you get lucky and go viral, which is the same exact situation as if you sign with a publisher and you're not one of the people they're going to throw the entirety of their marketing budget behind. They're basically hoping it becomes a viral success. So
Right.
that's really, if you're not a hands-on marketing person, your chances in either publishing either way are can be very much the same. But I mean, I would suggest to anyone that's trying to get a traditional deal, at least make sure you have an agent look it over, or and an experienced agent. Like my old agent made a decision that I think any newer young agent would have made, to take a chance on a new Random House imprint
Yeah.
instead of shopping it to some of the other smaller presses like Angry Robot or Titan Books or places like that that might have been interested, which we never looked at. And we kind of thought, oh, the Random House name is probably the smartest idea.
Well, and I think, um, and and I've got aspirations to get a traditional deal on some stuff that I want to do later on in the next year or so. So I'm not completely tied to the whole I'm an indie and nothing else. Obviously, I'm doing the hybrid thing with you guys. Um, but you look at someone like Michael J. Sullivan, who was traditionally published and then also indie published and then made a crap ton of money. And then now he's pretty much only indie. Um, and he makes a really good argument in that if you can effectively manage and handle doing it yourself and produce a quality book, um, then go ahead and do it yourself. If you don't think that you can create that quality, whereas you don't have the money to spend on a cover or editing or whatever else, then try to shop to a small press or a hybrid press or traditional publishing, because that is where you're going to get those services. Um, I mean, you're going to get what you when like you said, you're going to get kind of the service that you get depending on where you go. So you really kind of got to research what you're doing. Um, but it still is a viable option in my opinion. It's just it's not the only one.
It's a different
Um,
option, and it's a different fan
right,
base, really. And that's why, like, if I got a big publishing deal, I would totally do it, because
right,
it's if you're writing full time, the idea is that you're writing more than one series, which means you probably would be best to diversify where your money comes from. At any time, Amazon could say, we don't give 70% royalties to authors anymore. And
right,
honestly, right now, I'm mostly dealing with Audible Studios, which is technically a publisher, and they're paying advances and stuff. So, is that indie? Is that traditional? It's hard to really tell where the line is drawn. Like, yes, I'm producing my own ebooks and print books, but without a big publisher with end distribution behind it, my print books aren't really going to take off. Which is, again, something, if you could get a great traditional deal, then all of a sudden you might be able to build your print fan base in,
absolutely,
in comparison, which is something that as an indie can be very, very, very hard to do outside of like trying to sell signed books. Like if you build a huge following where people would want that sort of thing, which is great, but to really have the distribution to be in stores, and not just Barnes and Noble, but at any store. And there are things that most people don't even think about. There's a lot of book clubs where your print books get distributed and you get sales from and things like that. So it's not just Barnes and Noble, even though that's a huge chunk. And
Yep.
you're never really going to be able to access that stuff as most indies can.
Well, and you're right. But I mean, you just getting, like you said, diversifying, which I did a bit on a couple weeks ago, and that's my big thing is not putting all your eggs in one basket, and looking at what you're doing as a business person rather than just an author. Um, what I am intrigued about is that most people that I have spoken with, and granted they're mostly indies, is that we are all like the people that I talk to don't have this us versus them mentality that I've seen a lot of people in traditional publishing happen, and I don't know if that's because the self-publishing title has such kind of a stain on it from way back. I mean, we're talking decades ago, from people who just wanted to put out their books no matter what, and they paid to have them produced and put out, and they were crap books. Um, because now you look at how many people do you and I know? We could probably count on both hands the amount of people that you and I know that make seven figures on their income that have never had a traditional publishing deal.
Yeah.
Um, and so it's interesting to me that the purists, if you will, still have this negative look at indie authors when it's really all the same thing. I mean, it's really all we want to do is write stories that people want to read and have them buy them and read them. It's all the same to
Yeah. I mean,
me.
the argument gets kind of silly. Like I like to say, we're all authors. I think where the stigma still exists is like you said, people were doing that with self-publishing when it first started out, and they still are. There's hundreds of thousands of books going up on Amazon. Who knows who any of those authors are? Like,
Right. Right.
so you got kind of get bunched into all of those things. But then, I mean, there's a lot of small presses that are doing the same thing and just milling out a ton of ebooks. And that's
True.
not really traditional either if you're below the big five. So then all of a sudden is an angry robot author indie or traditional, even though they're not one like a big five publisher, just as an example. So it's smarter to say that everyone is just an author,
Yep.
in my opinion. But the stigma definitely still does exist out there. But I think what people get caught up in what's trending on Twitter or trending on Facebook, and I think that's a lot of this Nebula controversy was about, because I know it affected me. I didn't wasn't really productive last week, just seeing all this stuff online. And I think it's the same situation where I always see in like audiobook book groups that people say, oh, I won't buy an audiobook for a credit that's not longer than 12, 14 hours. Meanwhile,
Right.
I have a normal length novel out right now it's about 7.5, 8 hours, and it's selling really well on audio.
Right.
So people are doing it. They're maybe just not the vocal minority. So it's tough to know how people really feel, but the fact that indies are making that much money and that audiobooks of every length are selling as well as they are makes me think that the majority of readers just want to read good stories in a subgenre that they like. And they
Absolutely.
have no idea what any of this stuff is. Most of them probably don't actually know what the nebulas are. They just see Nebula finalists and they're like, oh, that's I've seen that word before, like subconsciously, but they don't really know
Right.
that it's like a group of pro sci-fi authors in this organization voting on an award, or what that is compared to the Hugos or the Locus Award or any of that. It's just a thing that they see on books. So it's tough to know how the majority of readers view things compared to the author community.
I'd be interested to run a split test of books where you have the same exact book, but you put the Nebula sticker on one, and then you just make up an award on the other one and put that sticker on the book and see if it affects
So
the
I actually
sales.
saw a post. I won't say whose name it was. I don't know if he wants it to be public. He's in NSFWA, and he was saying that there have been people have run tests to see what worked best. Nebula, Hugo, USA Today bestseller, and New York Times bestseller. And the
Yeah,
bestseller stuff always gets more clicks than the award stuff.
nice.
Again, so that's just you have to wonder what readers think. And I mean, it's awesome to be nominated for a Nebula Award, and I mean, I've always known like authors that are nominated. I look every year and stuff, but who knows how readers feel. So we do tend to get caught up in our own discussions and not really look at the mass readers who aren't involved in Twitter or Facebook or anything.
I know that really the only ones that matter. Well, let's talk about your story a little bit. Interview for the end of the world. Tell us a little bit about the story, what it's about.
So the story is about, if you've read Titanborn or that series at all, it's like 300 years after a meteorite hit Earth and was supposed to wipe out all of humanity, but didn't. And there was one group that left on an arc ship and went to Titan, Saturn's moon, to live there. So 300 years in the future, they're sort of living together, but then they reunite, and it causes the story of that book. So this story is about the brilliant scientist who basically built and developed and picked the people who were going to go on this ship to go start over a new paradise on Titan. So he was basically selecting geniuses is his thing. He wants the smartest people to go over who would be able to set up this colony, and he includes himself. And the story is kind of about his realization, basically as an adult, on if he deserves to go and what family means. So I think, and again, it's a story I wrote when I basically right after I finished Titan Wars. So I wrote it a while ago. I just didn't do anything with it until this year because I knew it was a solid story that stood alone and was also connected, but I didn't want to publish it before the connected books were out because
Right.
just doesn't make sense to do. So I kind of always held on to it. And then when I got the rights back to relaunch Titanborn, I was like, oh, so I'm going to include it in this big anthology, the Bridge Across the Stars anthology, which has a ton of authors putting in all sorts of stories that I helped collect and edit and stuff. So it's one of the stories in there, edited by Chris Porteau. And that's how I decided to put it out. And a lot of people who read the anthology wound up messaging me saying it was their favorite story and stuff, and they love. And again, it is more of a character-focused story. So I mean, I'm proud of it in the way that I think it can stand alone and also add depth to the series itself, which
Yeah.
probably isn't usually an easy thing to do, especially in under 7,500 words. But so that's where I'm really proud of the story, in that it does stand alone as a story about family and survival, and then also tie into the series in a way that sort of creates the history of a major character in the series and kind of casts doubts throughout the series on who is actually related to who and stuff, and if blood relation is important. That's why I think as a story it works on many levels, which to me is something that should be celebrated at the Nebulas, whether anyone thinks the story is good or not. But it does operate at a bunch of different levels that could work for people who just want to read a story or people who are into my series.
So I know the calls went out pretty much 2 weeks ago ish to let the authors know they were nominated. So tell us what went through your head when you got that phone call or that message that you're
Funny enough,
nominated.
I was actually seeing the Lion King musical with my wife in the city, and I got the call at intermission.
Nice.
So I had like 5 minutes to talk to the guy who called, and then I was like, I have to usually have to go. I'm about to shut the doors, and I'm at Lion King. So I didn't get to think about anything. It was a fun
Nice.
place to be for it.
So then you spent the rest of the musical thinking, I'm nominated. I'm nominated. Like, how was it? I mean, it's got to be one of those things where you're super excited, but then I can't tell anybody, right? Like,
Yeah, that was the
how,
most annoying part. I mean, like I told my parents and stuff, but
sure.
yeah, they're like, "Oh, you're like." I wish they would just kind of tell us on the day of. And again, I've seen people online say like, "Oh, like all these authors, indie and trad, like all of a sudden the next day they had the sticker on all their books." And again, people don't realize like they actually did tell us a week before.
Right.
So basically, for the next week, I was like, "Oh, what can I do?" I made a standalone version of the story that I could put on Amazon. I made a book funnel so people could get it for free. I gave it a Goodreads. I put the sticker on because you're just sitting there waiting for them to announce this thing. And yeah, I mean, it was annoying, but it was definitely a rush and pretty cool. I know my agent was pretty excited, but again, he couldn't tell anyone or anything. So it's kind of you just wind up playing a waiting game, which I'm glad that for the voting for winning, they actually don't find out until you're there,
Mm.
which is cool because you don't have to worry about keeping quiet, but also you have to like pay to go all the way there and not know
Yeah.
if you're gonna win or not. So there's ups and downs to that.
Yeah. Well, it'd be a fun trip regardless, I think. Well,
Yeah.
and how many people can say that they were nominated for a Nebula? I mean, it's a pretty
Um,
cool, pretty legit experience in and of itself, I think.
yeah, I guess like 25 a year back to the 50s or something.
Yeah,
Not counting repeats or any of that.
right. So you have a new book coming out though. You have one launching in your Titanborn series. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so tomorrow Titan's Sun gets relaunched. So it actually was originally released under the title From Ice to Ashes, but now that we've sort of made everything and I've reworked it to work in a continuous series, it got the new title Titan Sun. And it was a book that I think was actually my most critically well received book that no one read. I think a lot of it had to do was it was a sequel, but also a standalone, marketed as a standalone. Kind of didn't, but was marketed with the amount of money you would give to a sequel, even though it stood alone. I think the title I went with was probably too artsy, which is something I'm sure you've talked to people who follow your show about. Is kind of make sure readers know what the hell they're reading. Because
Right.
Rise to Ashes, if you read the book, is a really cool title that's artsy, but
Right.
like what does that really mean? It's something that I definitely learned from there. And honestly, I'm surprised that Random House let me even use that title, though it is really cool sounding. So that's what this book is. Um, it takes basically people to the other side of the conflict in Titanborn. I'm pretty excited to hear what RC Bray does with it on audio, just because I actually haven't heard anything from it yet. I never get to hear early on. So yeah,
He
we'll
doesn't
see.
give you all the snippets.
No, I could ask him for snippets if I want, I think, but Audible doesn't really give me a chance to listen up front.
And it's a trilogy, right? So you have Titanborn, Titan Sun, and then is
This is
Titan
structured as 4 books right now that are finished,
four books.
and then Audible bought a fifth book that I'm writing right now. I'm like 20,000 words into the fifth book, which will be called Titan's Legacy.
Oh, very cool. Very nice. And are you doing kind of a rapid release thing with the first ones, or is how what's the
So
release
book
schedule like
one
for
and
it?
two are pretty rapid because they were already done and set up. So that's the last one came out on February 5th. This one comes out March 5th. Book three will be released mid-May, and again, that has to mostly do with just the recording schedule,
Mm,
obviously. And then book four right now is scheduled for July, but we'll see. I don't even have a cover for that yet, and I don't think RC Bray has started recording that yet. So we'll see on that one. And then book five, I'm hoping to have finished by the end of the summer, so that it could come out on audio and ebook and print everywhere in fall.
very cool.
So not that rapid, but faster than I usually do, only because by buying back the rights to the book and then reworking everything, it wasn't that I had to write tons of new words. And again, through anyone who read the series when it was out earlier and the limited version, like there's a full novel's worth of new content and stuff. So there was a lot of work involved in turning it into this, but it allowed me to kind of be able to structure my releases and plan with Audible in advance, which is definitely a good thing to do because you never know with narrator schedules if all
Right.
of a sudden you turn in a book and you want to keep the same schedule on audio, that narrator might be booked for many months, which is something we're dealing with on the Buried Goddess saga on the fantasy side.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and you mentioned it's not as fast as your regular releases, but I mean, it's leaps and bounds faster than just straight traditional publishing.
No,
I
I
mean,
meant not as fast as other indie type
right,
releases.
right, right. Yeah,
It's it's fast for me really because
sure.
I'm usually slower.
Well, but I mean, you do the rapid release, but I mean, readers can only read so much, right? So
Yeah.
The Bay Regatta Saga, that the first 3 books are done, you're working on the next 3 books. Actually, I think you guys are on book 4. You finished book 4, and now you're writing 5 right now, right?
Finished book 4. We just have to finalize editing on it, and we're starting book 5. Yeah, and so the ebook for book 4 is going to be out in April. Audio, Luke Daniels' schedule is pretty tight, so the audio is probably going to be out in July for book 4, and then it should follow a schedule like that. Hopefully, we'll be able to have the whole series out on ebook at least by the end of this year.
Yeah.
And then for audio listeners, probably by early next year at the latest. But it might be possible to get it all done this year. It really will depend on Audible and Luke's scheduling.
Very cool. Well, congrats, man, on your nomination. It's a really exciting thing to see, and I'm gonna have Richard on Friday to talk about his story,
Oh,
and
cool.
it's really neat to see kind of what's happening in the author space, and see people I know get recognition that they deserve. So it's really a cool time to be in the industry, I think. So
Yeah, I think
congrats.
so. I mean, there's so many ways to put content out there and if you know what you're doing in a way where you could actually find readership now, that it's probably better than ever. You can go traditional, you can go indie, you could do a mix of both. Whereas
Right.
in the back in the day, you might only have to rely on like 6 publishers in existence to be able to get your book anywhere, kind
Right.
of thing. So there's definitely more options than ever before, which is great for writers.
Yeah, I mean, you can do 'em both at the same time even. Like,
Yeah,
my my long-term goal is to get a fantasy series published traditional, but then still do middle sci-fi and stuff on the indie side. Because I mean, look, you can do an epic fantasy in traditional publishing and do it like every 2 years. And
yeah,
then
exactly. And then all of a
and then
sudden, in that you do 3 books in a sci-fi series, and
absolutely.
then all of a sudden you're capturing print readers and ebook readers at the same time. So
Yep.
that's why I don't think it's smart to discount either option. I think you can use whatever option could get you to the most readers at that time, switch back and forth. And again, it might come down to what genre you're writing in or anything. Like military sci-fi is huge in indie right now.
Right.
But then I have like a weirder dystopian type manuscript that I have been holding on to, like waiting to hear back from publishers on because I think it would be a better fit on
Mm,
that side of things. So it can really come down to just looking at what subgenres are hot right now and where.
right. Well, thanks for coming on the show, man. It was great talking with you and having you on and sharing your experience. I appreciate that, and I think the listeners and viewers do as well. If we can send people to go and read the interview at the end of the world, where can they pick it up at?
So I think you could get it free still by signing up to my mailing list. I have it on Amazon. It's 99 cents. You could also get it in the Bridge Across the Stars anthology, or you can just message me and I'll give you a link to the book funnel where I'm happy to give people a chance to read it for free. I mean, it's a short story. I would make it free on Amazon if I could. I just haven't set up the price matching or anything yet like that. So I don't
Right.
expect anyone to be paying big money for the short story. But if anyone wants to read it, it's nominated, and I'd love to see what people think and give them a chance to read it, especially if they're fans of the series too, because I think that it has that second layer of intrigue.
Yeah. Well, I'll put the link in the show notes below, and then if you are watching this and you've read it, or you will read it in the future, come back and leave a comment in the video. Let us know what you thought about it, and if you bought it on Amazon, leave a review for Rhett. And those are always great things for authors to get on any
Yeah,
of their projects.
for
So.
sure.
Well, thanks so much again, Rhett, for coming on. Everybody in the live show, I know I didn't give you guys a whole bunch of love today, but thank you guys for coming and hanging out with us today on the Morning Haze. We will be back on Friday to talk to Richard Fox about his story Going Dark, and then tonight, I believe we have. I don't want to misquote. Let me look at the calendar really quick. On live, we have. Mark Allen Edelheit is on tonight.
Oh, cool.
So definitely come back on live. It's 8 p.m. Central, so 9 p.m. Eastern. We'll be live right here on Keystroke Medium, and we'd love to have you join us. So until then, I am Josh Hayes for the Morning Haze, and we will see you guys later. Bye.
Bye, guys. Thank you.
If I can find my cursor. There we go.